What is known as the modern era took place after what is also known as the Middle Ages. And during this time, there was the rise of what was known as the new science. Of course, now it would be the old science. One of the important figures during the rise of the new science was a good dead friend, Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642. Now, from a philosophical standpoint, what he did was the following. You might remember our good dead friend Democritus. His view was that the world is composed of atoms in the void, and the atoms have different shapes and crash into each other and form various things. There's also our good dead friend Plato, who had these ideals of the forms and mathematics, and of course our other good dead friend Pythagoras, who had this view that the world is mathematical. So the reason why I mention these is because Galileo combined them together. So we have Democritus's materialism, the idea that it's, physical objects, these atoms in the void, combined with the mathematics of Plato and Pythagoras, and this yields a mathematical, mechanical conception of the world. That essentially the world is matter in motion governed by math. And this view still dominates the conception of reality today. If you talk to physicists today, and you ask them, hey, is the world, matter governed by math? They would probably say yes. In addition to that notion of a mathematical, mechanical conception of the world, he also developed the notions of primary qualities and secondary qualities. Primary qualities are those that can be quantified, roughly put. This would include things like size, shape, motion, mass, and number. The secondary qualities are subjective qualities. They consist of color, odor, sound, and other similar qualities as well. Now, for Galileo, nature is composed of only mathematical primary qualities. So the really real world for real would be composed of, size, shape, motion, mass, number, etc. So what about these secondary qualities? Well, the secondary qualities present the natural world as we subjectively experience it. So color, odor, sound, and taste are not out in the world. Size, shape, motion, mass, and number are. But as we experience size, shape, motion, mass, and number, we would experience these in our mind with color, odor, and sound. So for example, take taste. Taste is not out there in the world. Taste would be in the shape of the things we eat. And, it affects our tongue. This physiology is developed later, but the idea would be if you eat something, the molecular shape, crudely put, of what you're eating interacts with the taste buds on your tongue, and then travels into your brain, and you experience the sensation of taste. But the taste is not in the shape. The taste is in your mind. Same with color. Color is not in the world. Color is in your mind. And so this distinction he drew between the primary and secondary qualities becomes very philosophically important. Now, another implication of the new science is this. We see a replacement of teleology with mechanical explanations. Many of the dead guys we looked at, before they were dead, advanced teleological explanations, which explain events in terms of their purposes, goals, or ends. For example, our good dead friend Aristotle took the view that the world is purposeful. There is a first mover that sets things in motion, not by shoving them around, but providing an end or goal for things. So, looked at scientifically, how would Aristotelian science answer the question, why do objects fall? Well, his answer would be, in order to achieve their natural state. They're trying to achieve an end. Not intelligently. They're not, the rocks aren't thinking, but it takes everything to be guided to its ends by these purposes. During medieval times, in Europe, if you ask someone who believed in God, if you ask them, why does it rain? They probably would say that God makes it rain in order to, nourish the crops, given explanations in terms of God. And so causes are given in terms of final causes. And remember, in this context, Aristotle's notion of final cause is not like the last cause, but it's the end or goal of something. To use a simple example, like if you're taking the class to graduate, in a way the final cause there is graduation. You're doing it to achieve that goal or end. Now, Galileo, one of the changes he made was this. He wasn't asking, why things happen. Are stones trying to achieve their natural state? Is God making it rain to, nourish the crops? He asked, how? How does this work? So that this gave rise to a science that asked a new sort of question. How do things work? This is not to say that people weren't looking at the question of how do things work for a long time, but this marked a sort of conceptual transition in science from Aristotelian science, medieval science, to what we now again regard as the new science. So what he looked for was an outward observable behavior of things, and not an inner meaning or divine purpose. Now, as you might imagine, this led to the elimination of final causes and God. This is not to say that final causes and God are gone, but for the most part in sciences today, you will not hear references to final causes, and you typically won't hear God being brought up. So elimination of God probably in a way too extreme, but what we now consider sort of like sciencey science takes out those final causes. And so we see in part this transition. So when God was still in the picture in science, he was no longer seen as a supreme good, drawing all things to their final end, kind of mirroring, what Aristotle said about the first mover. And so God is not seen that way. Why not? Well, going back to Occam's razor, we talked about methods. As mathematical physical laws were developed, many thinkers took them to provide sufficient explanations for natural events. And by Occam's razor, you don't need God actively intervening as much. Now, we do see sort of a gradual transition. It wasn't that suddenly overnight people just abandoned God. It's that the role of God was reduced. So how did God's role become reduced? Well, he became more of the first cause that set things in motion, after which things ran autonomously in accord with causal laws. And this led to the compartmentalization of religion and science. And so we see this transition. Now, this is setting the stage for our good dead friend, George Berkeley, and his idealism. And Berkeley is writing, after the rise of the new science, and he is a response to it, trying to make the world safe for religion again, as we'll see. And he's an important person to look at in terms of the primary and secondary qualities. So stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.